Hi everyone, welcome back to Be Rich, and I hope you had a wonderful weekend and you're ready to dive into the second part of the video. Yesterday we spoke about Microsoft and the influence Trump's administration is trying to wield on corporate affairs of Microsoft. This is not only true in Microsoft, it is true in a lot of American companies, like Anand said about Nvidia, about giving them permission to do business with China, saying give me 15% of your profits. So these kinds of wheeling and dealing, so-called art of the deal, is happening. And one of the major impediments to his art of the deal has been his control over the one branch of government which he has zero influence of. This has been purposely been kept separate since American currency is considered the reserve currency of the world. That means it should be fair and just, and the rule of law should always be applicable when it comes to the American dollar. This slide is not started by Trump. As Anand has rightfully pointed out a few times already, that this started with the previous administration under Joe Biden. Yes, what the Russians have done to the Ukrainians is not right, and it is should be dealt with severely, is an agreement. But to weaponizing the US dollar and holding the US dollar as a tool or a hostage in this negotiation with the Russians has led to a wider fault line which has opened up in the world. And that fault line is the underlying confidence in the dollar. There's two parts to this confidence. One, of course, the American government freezing the assets. Now, the second fault line, which is widening even further, is what Trump is trying to do with the Fed. Now, he's questioning if the Fed should be an independent branch of the government altogether by his recent antics to what he's done with Cook. So, to unpack this is what the second part of this is, and this will finally conclude with Anand's insight to where gold is finally heading with all this. So, Anand, what happened with Cook? What is he trying to do?
He's trying to fire Cook so that he can get an extra vote on the table. He's already got Chris Waller. He's already got another guy called RM, who was appointed for only 2 meetings, and he's got Lisa Cook. Now trying to weed out Lisa Cook. Now all this is because Trump is convinced that he needs lower rates, and Jerome Powell was trying to help Biden win the election. So he is trying to settle his personal scores with the Federal Reserve Chief. Now there's no personal score. There's nobody got any axe to grind. The world currency is the dollar. And for all these years, while they have on the margins tried to do something, the US government has largely laid off the Fed. And because the dollar is the reserve currency. And this gives the American government a privilege to borrow how much ever they want, with no cap on the borrowing and without really having to pay interest. Only now they are being forced to pay interest. Now
Because of the interest rate going higher and higher.
the rate going higher and higher. For 20 years, they never paid any interest. If they really work on strengthening the dollar, then you can understand that if they pipe down everything, they shut up all the nonsense, tighten their belts. Now that they don't have any recession, tighten the belts and bring down borrowings. And overall, the Fed will become stronger. The dollar will get stronger and will give a long term impetus to the American economy. Instead, you have a person who believes in authoritarianism, who wants to meddle in everything. And now you are meddling with corporate jobs. You are meddling with the governor of the
Fed.
Fed Reserve. All this, what are you sending to the market? I don't care. This is what I will do. This is my belief.
Yeah, because what's happened now, which is of why we're talking about this again, is the Justice Department in the United States, Department of Justice, which is fighting the case in the Supreme Court on the legality of Trump being allowed to fire Lisa Cook. They're arguing, saying the market really doesn't care what we do to Lisa Cook. It doesn't care if the Fed is independent or the Fed is completely influenced by Trump. And that is a very bizarre thing for the Department of Justice to say. Even that is supposed to be independent.
Yeah, and also what I want very shocking is for the Supreme Court to entertain this notion. Everybody knows that if Trump interferes with the Fed, the dollar is going to go down and dive down in value. While temporarily it may give them an advantage and a big boost in exports, long term it's in big trouble for the US dollar because the actual interest they have to pay on their borrowings will keep going up. And most of their returns are tax what they are collecting today is dependent on the stock market. If Trump gets involved with corporate policies, if he pushes and the courts give him the independence to push and put pressure on the Federal Reserve, sooner rather than later you will have a collapse of the dollar. And because it's the non-Americans who majority of the federal borrowing, it's the non-Americans who own majority of corporate stock holding. If they lose confidence in the markets that this market is rigged and they lose some money, everybody will pile out of the market in no time. Like in Silicon Valley Bank, how they use the computer to remove the deposits without less queue standing in line, because everybody will sell their stocks for cash, and it will all put pressure on the dollar. The debt will remain real, like what Irene Fisher thought, and the value of the assets against it will keep coming down. So you will trigger a margin call and on the stock market and put it on a pandemonium. The first signs of trouble are already there. The Bitcoin is down 7%. This is because corporate treasuries are not buying Bitcoin anymore.
Correct.
So the moment somebody stopped buying, Bitcoin is suffering, and lot of futures people are defaulting. So all cryptocurrencies has been down last week. This is a clear what I told you that crypto is a human construct, and all human constructs are fallible. Same way, the Federal Reserve is also a human construct. It is also capable of failing. But if the movement is independence, and if the president of America decides to fire the a leading counsel, legal counsel of the Microsoft, then you are going to have where the government is in to run the for sake of deals, run the markets. The markets can show the Americans how bad it can get. Considering all this and putting a secular value into rising gold, Chris Wood, formerly of IIFL Research in Singapore, has clearly said that gold can go to $6,600. That's a staggering 80% rise from here. If this happens, it means, like Nassim Talib said, the world has lost confidence in dollar and has gone to gold as a de facto currency. And China is also making moves like opening up the Shanghai Commodity Exchange for you to trade in gold. What the authoritarian regimes are saying is we'll protect gold. And so they know to fire on the dollar, they have to fire from the shores of on the shoulders of gold. And when this is going on, you try to finger somebody in Microsoft thinking that it is good for you. This will also backfire because people will vacate the corporate stocks also, and corporate prices will fall. So if corporate prices falls, people will know see their net worth crore in front of them. Whereas in real estate, you have to struggle to find the price, and the buyer can decide what price the seller needs to get. But in case of star markets, the quotation is there right in front, and you have to decide on the correct quotations. So this is extremely difficult. This will put pressure on the American market. It will put pressure on the dollar and the status of dollar as a reserve currency, unless the Americans change things.
Correct. So do understand what the implications of this is. It's just not a question of passing an opinion. Before, of course, someone passed an opinion, we knew nothing much would come out of it. But Trump has proven time and time again, when he passes an opinion, there are consequences to those opinions. A simple tweet from him, a simple post from him on social media leads to widespread action in the Americans because they seem to be constantly trying to keep him happy in the corporates and even within his own government. This reminds me of the famous story of the emperor and his new clothes. Do remember, it is the end of the story when an innocent child looks at the emperor and calls him out. Till then, it goes on believing that everything is hunky dory. So this seems to be the market is waiting for that lowly child to come out and look at the emperor and say, what's happening? So if the day that happens, this whole pile of cards we're sitting on, house of cards that is, can come tumbling down. So be aware of this. We're not trying to fearmonger here. We're not trying to scare you. We're not trying to tell you immediately sell everything and buy gold and just hold on to gold. We're telling you to be prudent and cautious of what is happening and pay attention to it and to move wisely and smartly. Of course, Trump is not the only person in the American government. in the American country. There's more to it. There are more, structures in their government which have not fallen and which are not shaken. But still, that said, we have to wait and watch the next election cycle. The next election cycle, the small election cycle in the US, is going to give us deep insight as foreign investors to see the mood of the American people and how the American people feel. Because a lot of it depends on what the Americans themselves want to do in majority. So I would suggest to follow the election news a little more closely this time in the United States, especially small elections, not the large ones. Thanks for watching Be Rich today. I hope you found the two videos we put together for you interesting and informative as always. And we wish you a wonderful week ahead in the last few days of September and the beginning of October as we get into the last 3 months of the year. Thank you for being with me on Be Rich today. Thank you.
Thank you for supporting Be Rich.